Hi. Well, week eight's coming to a close. And in week eight, we were looking at networks and PERT and other diagramming techniques. And I hope you're digesting that and getting that under your belt and becoming a little bit more comfortable with those networking techniques. In week nine, we're going to talk about looking at rating schemes, urgency assessments, and data quality assessment. And the reading assignments over there in Pritchard, that's the three chapters in Pritchard, and then there's chapter 8 in PMI, practice standard. But I also added a note this week to this slide about Appendix D in the PMI practice standard. And that Appendix D is tools, techniques, and templates for project risk management. It starts on page 69 in there. Really would encourage you to read that and read that well. It goes through all of the different tools and techniques for assessing risk, evaluating it qualitatively, quantitatively, and I think it will really help you get a leg up on addressing risks and being able to handle them and make them a part of your toolkit in handling risks for projects. I think it'll be a real help to you. So let's start on week 9. Let's start on taking a look at week 9. Last week I showed you a couple of risk analysis sheets that I've used in projects, and I'm going to bring them back. I want to refresh your memories and your minds with them, and I'm going to go into them in a little further depth. But first, I want to talk about when we really, from the 50,000 foot level, when we're looking at risk reduction, planning is really a major element of risk reduction. And one of the things that I've learned about projects, managing projects, planning projects, is when you start, keep it really simple, keep it straightforward, keep it clear. And clarity makes a huge difference in your ability to communicate, for the team to pick it up and to run with the project. To keep it simple, I usually like to look at this planning scenario or strategy. I start out with the project overview statement, which is a single page, has the problem opportunity on it, the goal, which is the goal of the project, and then the objectives which we achieve, like milestones on the road to the goal, what our success criteria is, and then any major assumptions, risks, and obstacles, really at the high level, the initiation stage, the planning stage. Once we get our project initiated and we're authorized to start planning, then you want to go in and create the WBS by starting out with the project goal as the top level, and then starting to break that down, no matter what technique you use to break it down, by phases, function, however you and your planning team see the project. That's the way you want to break it down until you have identified all the tasks that have to be accomplished for the project. And then for each one of these tasks, you want to fill out or make, this is just representative, you want to have a task description sheet which describes the task and all the resources and the duration of the task and all the elements, the basis for your estimate, where it comes from. Really straightforward. Have one of those for every one of your tasks, and then you can refer to them as you go forward. And also there'll be a clarity in understanding what the tasks are. Once you have the tasks all laid out, that's when we can put the network together. And you were just looking at networks in just this week. And in putting the networks together, the most important element in putting a network together from the tasks is we set up the precedents. We look at all the tasks, and we're able to make decisions about which tasks have to come first, which tasks can't be started until others are finished, what are the constraints, how do they relate to each other, and by finally putting the network together, getting all the tasks linked together in the project in the order that they have to be performed, so that the project can be done and follow-on tasks can be accomplished. From that, we learn what the critical path is, we learn what the duration of the project is, and we learn what kind of slack we have in paths, so that we can use that when we're doing our resource leveling, and when we use it, we can use that later on during the project if we have situations come up where we have to delay tasks or move them around, or or juggle resources around. And then from the network, then want to put that on a time baseline, which is the Gantt chart. That's our constructed schedule. By taking our simple project planning through these cycles at the point where we have our Gantt chart finished and tasks loaded, we can see what tasks are going to be done at the same time, which ones come first, which ones come second. We can load our resources from our basis of estimate sheets, and we can also the fixed cost hourly cost rates or any cost for materials or anything like that. And then from that planning, from that constructed schedule and all that material, we can build up our project cost estimate sheet. And during this whole cycle, from the very beginning to this point in the planning, we can be keeping track of any elements that come to attention that we consider to be risks or potential risks, and then we do our risk evaluation. Okay? So what we want to really do then is really keep it simple, have a straightforward and thorough planning. Then we want to have a really effective risk mitigation scenario set up to assure our mutual success. We want to make sure that we got acceptance defined. What are the conditions for acceptance? One of the things I learned many years ago was that in the beginning, when a project starts, everybody's on good terms, good relations, and there isn't any hostility or emotion or friction or anything like that at all. And so, big risk mitigation device for me, an automatic build-in, is that up front, I want to get acceptance defined between the customer and myself as the project manager, or between the customer and the project. And by having the conditions for acceptance defined early, you keep the emotions out of it, and everybody has the proper same level of focus, and you can define what the criteria has to be for acceptance. And then from that, you can generate a checklist. And then at the time of the actual acceptance downstream in the project, by making sure that the checklist is complete, that everything that was agreed to for acceptance has been accomplished, then only concurrence is required. The customer doesn't have to sit there and put their careers on the line saying they're going to take acceptance. Acceptance has already been defined. All they have to do is to concur with you that all this criteria for acceptance has been met, it has been demonstrated, and therefore the conditions for acceptance as previously defined have been met, and therefore you can sign off for acceptance. Okay? This then creates the ability for the customer. The second standard risk mitigation strategy for the project is to set up the conditions of satisfaction, to define those with the customer, make sure they're very clear, understandable, and that they are an informed outsider could understand in under 2 minutes. In other words, it's very simple to communicate the conditions of satisfaction to an outsider, and they will understand it. Finally, they need to be measurable. By having quantitative results, then there's no doubt about what degree of satisfaction there is. There's either satisfaction or there's not, and we can keep away from all those subjective measurements. These two items, conditions for acceptance, having acceptance defined early, and conditions of satisfaction, having those defined with the customer up front, will go a long way to reducing the risk and reducing the issues downstream when we're getting close to the end of the project. Okay, so let's start talking about these risk management templates again. This is a very simple, straightforward risk management template that has been used by a number of projects. And one of the things I really like about it is if you go across the top, it's broken up into about 5 sections, 4 steps, and then an information section. The first one is identification. What's the risk identification? Second is, what is the assessment? What's the gross risk, the probability, and then the net risk? And then what's the action plan? Who's the responsible party? What's the action to mitigate? What's the cost of mitigation? What happens to the probability? Now, there's a probability should get reduced of the impact, and then you come up with a new net risk and a new mitigated net risk. And then the fourth section is for tracking that project. tracking that action, that risk element, and then if it were to occur, what is the actual net impact? And we can see very clearly by using a very simple, straightforward grid like this or table like this. It's very easy to have a good perspective on the risks and where they stand. Step one, identification. Step two, assessment. Step three, action plan. Step four, tracking. And then there's an information column for whatever information you would like to have in there. With that, son, I want to come back to the sheet that the risk analysis and mitigation summary sheet from my project that I managed, and we've gone over this last week. I want to do it again because I want to bring your attention back to it. I want to clear up any points that may not have been clear, and I really want to use it primarily to refresh your memory so that we can go on. If you recall, we had the sheet broken up in schedule, cost, and performance. Here is one of the risks: adequacy, availability of staffing, and we looked at the cost, the impact, the probability, and then the weighted cost and the weighted schedule impact should that risk impact occur. Okay? And then in the totaling up all of the risks, we can look at the total of the cost impacts, the schedule impacts, and then also the probability of all those risks should they occur. What is the net or the weighted probability? Based on the probability of the impact, then we could look at a weighted cost impact and a weighted schedule impact. And that was what we had set up for that first project risk assessment and mitigation. We didn't have any mitigation set up for it yet. It was strictly looking at the risks, the impact, the probability, and then the weighted cost and schedule impact. And we totaled that along the bottom of the chart, and on the right hand side we had the date when it was done, and we also had a summary there: required reserve contingency budget of $2.695 million, 35 weeks of schedule, and that corresponded with the total weighted cost in the columns in the middle of the page. Then we took that on and went to a little later date, about a week or so later. We looked at that original risk analysis and mitigation summary, and we looked at those things that might change now that we had a chance to reflect on it and think about it. And the technique is to highlight in red the text of any elements that increase or are going in the wrong direction. We looked at contract overruns. We had actually put some mitigation in there. We assigned some mitigation. We were going to put a controller on that to monitor subcontractor, the cost of the mitigation, and then the probability, what the probability improvement would be. 80% probability improvement, which meant a 20% reduction in the previous probability factor, which helped us reduce the impact of that of that risk. And then we had another mitigation action taken, and that was to improve the timeliness, adequacy of training concerned about the user community, and by adding some reviews, technical reviews, and putting a syllabus together for helping them with their training, the customer with their training, we were able to reduce even further that particular risk. So we took that mitigation step, and that was a significant improvement in where we were going. In summary, at that point then, the weighted cost impact of the risk had dropped from 4.585 or 4,585,000 down to 4,345,000, which was a $240,000 reduction in risk impact, which is not insignificant. However, the cost of our mitigation to affect that reduction was $110,000, which had to go immediately into our project cost budget, because we were going to be actually spending that money because we had to actually perform that mitigation. Okay, so now it's a little later. It's about a month and a half later, and we've taken another look at the project, and at the risk mitigation. And you'll notice I didn't show these tabs the last time. I didn't have them in the section that I took off the computer screen, but I put them here so that you could see them. My technique is that I keep all the tabs. The one on the right, May 23rd, was the first one that was done, and that tab is here as it originally was, and then June the 7th, the one we just looked at, and then this one is July the 31st. And this one, then we can look back and we have traceability from all the previous, and there's no smoke and mirrors or anything like that. It's very clear and it stands out what the changes are. In this update and review of our risk status and looking at risks, we notice that we're following the same legend of red indicating a change from the last report fundamentally. Also, we want to see taking more mitigation. I want to bring your attention right now to the lower right, because I also, with this type sheet, I keep the previous summaries so that we can actually see the progression, where we were before and where we are now. For instance, in the June 7th risk assessment summary, we had $110,000 of mitigation costs that we had to put into the budget, and our weighted risk impact reserve had to be 4.345 million and 50.2 weeks. And you can see as effective on July 31st, when this particular update was done, we were able to reduce our risk reserve from 4.345 down to 3.964, which is actually a reduction of about 350. What is that number? That's almost $400,000. So it's a pretty good reduction. Plus, we've taken it down almost 7.5 weeks. However, our mitigation cost has gone up. Not an additional 195,000. It has only gone up by 85,000, from 110,000 to 195,000, and that's because of the addition of these four mitigation actions that we intend to take, and the results of that is a reduction in our risk impact. We take a look now at the first one up there, and this is again make and availability of staffing. We looked at that risk, we didn't have any mitigation for it. Now what we are saying is our mitigation is going to make our sourcing priority is going to be external. So when we have a problem with staffing, we've set up external methods and external sources to acquire staff to keep us from having that type of impact based on either the customer or ourselves being short on staff. So that was the mitigation cost of $50,000, but it reduced the impact by 50%, and you can see that the weighted cost has gone from $330,000 down to $165,000, and the scheduled 6.6 week impact is down to 3.3. So that's a significant improvement. It's basically been cut in half. The next one is a coordination of joint events, whether or not we're able to have joint meetings, project reviews, design reviews, whatever, at a time when they should be done, rather than scheduling them at a convenient time where people are available. One of the things to overcome that was to get away from the travel and taking people away from their work areas and their homes. We plan to do much of the joint events by webcast or net meetings, and that was our backup. And the cost was almost insignificant, $5,000, but the net impact reduced down 40%. In other words, a 60% improvement, and you can see that the $210,000 weighted cost went down to $84,000, and the 4.2 weeks went down to 1.7. So far better than just cutting it in half. Then we had one more. This is travel problems due to adverse weather, and we again were going to employ a webcast net meeting type backup. Added some mitigation cost in that. That's the cost of the network setting up the electronic meeting, internet meeting, and this improved the net impact by 50%, so we fundamentally cut the risk impact in half. And then the risk about directed change in scope, where we would have a situation in which we would be told by the customer flat out that we had to have a change in scope and go through the change process to mitigate that getting out of control and creating chaos on the project and do the project plan. We developed a rigorous change management discipline which we were going to faithfully follow, and the cost of that mitigation, the generation of that change management plan, was $25,000, but it reduced the risk impact by 60% down to 40%. And you can see that that $350,000 impact dropped down to 140, way below half, and the 5.6 weeks down to 2.2. So those were all significant improvements. There was one risk area, original risk area, that went the wrong way. This risk area has increased, and therefore the area of increase has been highlighted in red. And this is the risk is compatible actual completion dates of other requirements, and therefore we were worried. We had a situation where the completion dates would not be compatible with the between the project and the customer's efforts. We actually found out by now, within a month and a half, that that would become a problem, and it was going to be more significant, and that risk effort went up. So you can see now by looking at these three risk analysis and mitigation summary sheets, the risk picture as of the 23rd of May, as of the 7th of June, as of the 31st of July, you can see the progression and you can see the dynamic nature of the risk analysis and mitigation summary, and that risk management is a dynamic environment and a dynamic condition across the project. All right. And so once more now, just in summary and conclusion, we can look at the lower right hand corner, and we can see the what we had the last time, June the 7th, and the tab is there over there on the left, or we can go to the tab in the Excel sheet and we can look at all the details if we want to. However, for convenience to the customer, we bring this up and show him what it was, the summaries were the last time and what it is now. And there should be some small smiles, because there has been a relatively good positive improvement in reducing the amount of risk and the risk reserves that had to be held back or put on hold for possible use in risk for risk impacts. With that done now, let's go to October the 11th. Here we are now, some months ahead, and we want to take a look at the same sheet and see what happens. And we don't see a lot of red on here. There is some. There was additional unspecified risk. This is like the unknown unknowns. And that had gone up. There was some concern on the project, and that had actually gone up. There was no mitigation specified for it, but that went up, and so we wanted to make sure everybody would see that that had occurred. Also, in the planned webcast meetings, the actual net impact actually dropped. They should be in green, by the way, and that's an error on my part. That should have been green instead of red because it was an improvement. And they went way down to 25%. In other words, they're now only, well, you can see it was originally 210,000 weighted cost impact down to 52,000. So that's a significant improvement. And the same thing here, because it's the same type of mitigation, that dropped down to 25% for adverse weather travel. So we had a significant improvement here, where this risk, adverse travel risk, is almost a non-risk anymore. You can look at how low the net weighted cost impact and the net weighted schedule impact are for that. There was an additional improvement. If you recall, this was one of the first mitigations that we had put in here, and that was regarding contractor overruns. We were going to have a controller to monitor a subcontractor, and what occurred here was that this net impact dropped a little bit too in our assessment and went to 60%. So now this had dropped the net weighted cost of $750,000, 750,000 had dropped down to 450,000. So that's a pretty good reduction on that. And again, in the lower left hand corner, I wanted to point out to you that this is October the 11th when this picture was taken. And so you can see now we have 4 months of pictures. You also can note that in this particular project, the project manager's decision or judgment, mine, decided that to update these risk assessment sheets and review them on a specific formal basis did not have to occur every month, but at least about every couple of months or whatever, they should be reviewed, and they were reviewed. Now, if we go over to our total here, now we can take a look at where we were on June the 7th at $4.3 million. That dropped down significantly in July 31st to 3.6, and now it's dropped down another almost $400,000 as of October the 11th. So that has come from $4.3 million down to 3.5. So that's an improvement, a reduction in the amount of reserves of almost $800,000, $40,000 less than 800,000, and the schedule reserve from 50 weeks down to 41 weeks. That's about 10 weeks. That's a pretty significant reduction in that as well. And from this type of summary, you can see that the progression, the overview of what the changing complexion of risk is for this particular project. You can see that we've got a pretty good picture of what's going on. And also at this time, you notice there is no change in the mitigation costs because we haven't added any mitigation or changed any mitigation. So it still stood at $195,000, which was the amount added to the budget cost baseline. So there was no additional increase or decrease in mitigation, but we did have a significant decrease in the net weighted cost risk reserve in cost, and a net weighted risk reserve for schedule for this project. So I wanted to take you through that again, take you through what we did last week, and bring you up and take you through all four of these sheets, because it gives you a picture, a dynamic picture of how risk is managed and risk is looked at and considered in this basis, using this kind of a template, using this kind of information. And quite frankly, I have used this for many tens of years, and I find that it is very compatible with customer desires. They understand it. My management in different organizations I've been in, they understood it. My teams have understood it, and it's pretty clear and pretty straightforward. And also, by being broken up in schedule, cost, and performance, it is pretty self-explanatory as you're moving forward. I have two other examples that I wanted to show you. This is from another project. What's really interesting here was that when I looked at this project was done a lot later. This is done in 2009. I used almost the same type of risk categories under schedule, cost, and performance. You see I'm using the same format. And also you can see that in the mitigation that we did, we actually did put that in green this time. I caught that and got it in green. And you also can see that the two of the mitigation elements in here really didn't require any cost. For instance, close weekly coordination on site, the second one down. There was no cost for that, but yet by having close weekly coordination, that could be done on site because we had people on site. We could reduce the impact of that on-time delivery for dependencies, and which was very significant. And then the second one, requested cross-project coordination. This is also, it's similar to on-time delivery of dependencies. This is lack of timely defined program level constraints and drivers. In other words, we might get into a situation where we're trying to really define what the constraints or the drivers are, and they couldn't be fleshed out or detailed out quantitatively sufficiently. And then also you can see in the actual risk impacts for cost and schedule, the raw cost and schedule impacts, there was some increases. Some of those numbers went up from a previous evaluation, and the probabilities changed too. So now you can see what is going on here in using the same kind of template going forward. In this particular case, this is the same schedule as previously, but we've jumped in time. What you're seeing is that this is the third formal update to the project risk analysis and mitigation summary. And in this one, I've put in here the hourly rate cost table. I've moved it so it's in the picture so that the reader would have a sense of what I was looking at and what the basis are for some of these numbers. For instance, this one is an hourly rate cost table, and we're saying that for one head, we're taking an average of $125 per hour, 40 hours a week, and then if there's 5 people, it's $625 an hour, 200 hours, excuse me, and then we go to $5,000 a week. One's an hourly. Then there's a weekly, and then we do the same thing for 1 and 5 heads for yearly, $250,000 a year for one person, and $1.25 million a year for 5 people. And then also there's a little table up here. I use it as my cheat sheet. And what I'm looking at up there is I look at the various risk items, and I look at the item number, and I look at the weighted cost of that item number. And because I'm looking at how many dollars have I alleviated out of the risk contingency. And then underneath that's a small table. I look at the risk, and you can see that 1,458,750, $1.5 million is the same thing as on the weighted impact cost column, 1.458 million, and then the mitigation is 44,000. But we've alleviated it by 284,500. That's from the top edition. So we subtract that out, and we say we have a reserve now of about $1.218 million. And so I can look at that and compare that reserve to the previous one, and I see an improvement, a net benefit of about $250,000, 240,500. And that's the analysis I sort of do on the side to check and see how much improvement are we achieving in this with the mitigation and with the way we're addressing our project risks. If there are any of you that have any additional questions on any of this, I'd be glad to have a session either online or telephone conference or anything like that to discuss any of that. But these 3 charts and this material here, I think goes to the heart of one way, one method, one technique, one way of managing risk and presenting risk, and doing it in a way that the customer, your management, and your team really understand that. So that's about the end of what I want to talk about on these charts, and I want to summarize up the weeks right now. What I want to talk about is what I consider to be whole cloth and a dead dragon. The whole cloth is really the whole cloth of risk management. One of the things that's truly required is situational awareness. And that is that as a project manager, we want to have good situational awareness. We don't want to be focused on what I call our shoe tips. We want to see the big picture, what's around us, what's around the project, what's the customer community doing, what's our own community doing, being prepared, having a good event horizon out a long distance away. And by having your event horizon out a long distance, you can see something when it becomes over the horizon, and you have a chance to evaluate it to find out whether it's good or bad news and what you can do about it. And the sooner that you can be aware that there's an event coming over the horizon, the more time you have to do something about it. And then forward visibility, effective planning. Work your plan, protect your baseline, and make sure that you don't compromise your baseline as you're going through the planning cycle. Engage your total resources. Use your team wisely. Practice really good leadership. Make sure that you're using your resources and you're keeping them healthy and happy and respecting each other and working together well. As a project manager, you need to be optimistic. You need to know that you are going to achieve the goal, your team is going to achieve the goal, and that there are solutions for every problem. But the way I like to look at it also is I'm an optimist, but I have to always look for the downside because the good things will come true and take care of themselves. It's the things that'll come sneak up on you and eat your lunch that are the things that can really hurt you. So I have to look for the downside. I have to look for the things, make sure that I hear what I have to hear, not what I want to hear. And I need to make sure that people have the attitude that they're going to tell me what I need to know, not what I want to know. So be optimistic, but look for the downside. And know this always. By doing good planning, I talked to you about the crystal ball, our virtual walk out into the future during planning. You have to know that there are solutions. There are always solutions to every problem. It's a question of time and money and technology, but there are solutions to all problems. It's just a matter of choices, and that is so truthful. It's a matter of looking at the choices you have and then optimizing it, making sure that what you do is you select an optimal choice that gives the project the best chance for success. And then maintain a high energy level and a low stress level. Keep your health. Work on that. You got to have a good health. And you remember what I told you about your stress quotient. Figure out ways, understand your body, understand yourself, know how to dump stress. You got to get rid of stress, and that doesn't mean take it out on somebody else or beat somebody else up or put your fist through the wall. It means you got to learn how to dump it. You know, there were times that I got so stressed in my early project management experiences that I would take what I called a long lunch, and I would tell the team I was going for a long lunch. And what I would do was I would take off and go to a noon movie. And I would sit in the movie for an hour and a half, the noon showing, the 12 o'clock showing, and it would just unwind my brain. I would get involved in looking at the picture. I wouldn't be eating lunch. Well, I'd have some popcorn maybe, but I would go to a movie and it would totally flush my brain. My brain would have a chance to sort out things. I wouldn't have to worry about it. I would be preoccupied with the movie. I'd walk out of the theater feeling really, really refreshed, and my stress level would be almost down at zero. I'd walk back in the office about 1:45 in the afternoon and walk in there, and I'd be ready to do my job and do it really well. And I had a smile on my face, and it really helped me and it really helped the team. And I hope it'll work for you too. I hope these will help. And in that case, then you're going to have a dead dragon, okay? And that means you've killed risk, you've killed the things that are going to have a chance of destroying your project, and you are on a really great track for a good project success, and so is your team. So now, with all that said and done, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Okay, the risk is yours now. Whether you've got a meltdown in your engine, overheating, you've got a rock slide coming, or whether you just destroyed your barbecue machine or run out of time, the risk is yours. And then we can finish with week 9 this week. We're going to go into week 10, and that's going to be some risk modeling, sensitivity analysis, and Monte Carlo simulations. Real interesting stuff. Be sure to read that Appendix D in the PMI practice standard.